everyone, welcome to another episode of Because I Have Thoughts. I'm Dr. T, and today I'm going to share my thoughts on narcissism. It seems to be such a hot button right now, such a hot topic across social media, across news platforms. It is definitely the buzzword of the year, which there are several of them. I was on the phone with a friend earlier this week, and we were talking about all of the buzzwords for 2024. And of course, narcissism is definitely one of them. I feel like narcissism has been a buzzword probably for the past 2 years, but it's definitely gained some momentum in 2024. So I just wanted to share my thoughts about it. I was actually gonna take a break for the summer and enjoy my summer and not do any episodes for this summer, but I just felt like this conversation was a natural pivot after, following the relationship episode that I did 2 weeks ago, that I posted 2 weeks ago. So we're going to talk about narcissism. Everybody wanted me to go into marriage, which I'm just not really ready to talk about that topic yet. I think at some point I will. I got to pray about that. I'll let y'all know, but I will do an episode on marriage at some point, I'm sure, especially since I did the piece with IdeaStream on SoundCloud about gender roles, and then talking about the categorizing relationships last week. I'm sure people would like to hear from me on marriage. At least I've gotten lots of messages asking me to talk about marriage. So I will eventually talk about that, but that isn't this episode. This episode is about narcissism. So we're going to talk about that. So I'm just going to kind of break down my experience with narcissistic people. Or my personal journey with in narcissistic relationships, and share a little bit about the victim's point of view. I really hate that word. It's just been stigmatized so poorly, but actually it applies in this scenario. So I will be using it and not in the sense of like helplessness, but just subject to someone else's behavior, choices, or decisions. So I will be talking a little bit about that. I will also kind of give some clarity around narcissism, because I think this whole conversation started, and I could be truly wrong about this, that a young lady was in a relationship with someone and she posted something about I just broke up with my narcissistic boyfriend or something like that. And that just like sent us all, the entire world, into this discussion about narcissism and narcissistic behaviors and being in narcissistic relationships. There's also been tons of studies done now, research, about narcissistic behavior, which is really challenging to kind of trust. I don't want to say trust, but I'm questioning it a little bit, because one of the tendencies of narcissists is not wanting to get therapy. So I'm like, how are you doing this research if no narcissist wants to get therapy? Anyway, those are my thoughts on that. But there's research done about it. There's even a diagnosis of MPD, which I'll talk about a little bit, but I also give a book recommendation. She's a specialist, proficient in this area, an expert. I am not. I am an expert at experiencing narcissistic relationships, but I am not an expert on the topic of narcissism. Let me just clarify. But the book that I'll recommend at the end is an actual doctor in that area. I'm a doctor too, but not that kind of doctor. And she will break down narcissistic behavior. This book is fascinating. It literally changed my life and helped me to heal even further from narcissistic behaviors and from narcissistic relationships, and just gain clarity on how to navigate new relationships if I run into another narcissist. All right. Okay, let's get started. Y'all know I'm crazy. So let's just start at the beginning. We literally all are born with narcissistic tendencies. I know people think that sounds crazy, especially people who are like, I'm nice, and who don't have a distinct understanding of what narcissistic behavior looks like. So this is just a conversation of dispelling what that is. So we're all born with narcissistic tendencies. Think about that. Sit on it, meditate on it. And I'm going to explain how. We are all born infants. When you come into this world, you are in the infant stage. And the number one thing that infants do is cry. They cry to get everything they want. It is their own or their only source of communication is to cry. They are crying for milk. They are crying for comfort. They are crying to be changed. They are crying to be held. They are just crying. Well, that's a narcissistic tendency that humans just cry or have fits or do whatever behavior or action to comfort themselves in the moment. So we are all born that way. However, as we grow and mature emotionally and mentally, we start to learn behaviors that deduce or regulate the narcissistic tendency that we have when we're born. So it depends on how your parents raise you. It depends on how much trauma you're exposed to as a child. It depends on the relationship that you learn between behavior and consequences. So that's how we all start to evolve emotionally and mentally and move past the infancy stage of narcissistic behavior. And if you watched the emotional safety video that I put up maybe a month ago, I'm not really sure how long. I do not have a great sense of time with regards to like when something happened, y'all. I'm just not. I'm always on time. But if you ask me what time and date something happened, I can't. No, most of the time I can't really remember. But anyway, I just don't have the brain space to hold that. I guess that information is not important enough for me to hold space for it in my brain. I'm not really sure. But anyway, about a month ago or previously, I did a video on emotional safety. If you watched that video, you saw tons of recommendations for developing emotional healthy habits that are conducive to maintaining emotionally healthy relationships and maintaining your own emotional health. So when you are an infant and you're born, and we all are born with narcissistic tendencies, which are tendencies to prioritize ourselves for survival, then how you grow and mature emotionally and mentally helps you develop past the immediate stage of, I'm just going to act out to get what I want. All right. Usually around a toddler stage is when parents can start introducing the relationship between decisions, behaviors, and consequences. That's where narcissism kind of gets lost, is when you don't establish a relationship between the behavior and decisions and the consequences of those behaviors and decisions. All right. Is everybody tracking? I hope so. So in that journey, at some point, there has to be a aha moment of like, oh, what I do impacts other people. And that's how you can identify. That's one of the identifiers of a narcissist, is that like they just don't even connect the dots of, when I do something, there's a consequence for it, good, bad, or indifferent. There is some type of disconnect, some type of relational disconnect that they can't comprehend or process, that my behavior and decisions impact other people. Their main goal is to have their behaviors and decisions impact themselves in a positive manner. They are prioritizing themselves in every scenario, no matter what. So if you're in a relationship with a narcissist and they're committed to you and they're like, I love you, they do love you, but their innate being is to prioritize themselves, their self-love, above all, even if they have children. So, think about that and process that. Okay, now that we've established that everyone is born with an instinct to be narcissistic because we are just built to do things for our own comfort and our own survival through the infancy stage, and that we understand that there's an evolution that has to occur within us to combat that and regulate that to help us engage in healthy human relationships and negate our narcissistic tendencies. Let's move forward to how things sometimes progress. Well, studies have shown that men more than women are narcissists. And don't come at me, y'all. This is just what the study says. I can't say that that's been my personal experience. I'm just saying that's what the study says, okay? And I am not a man basher, man hater. I love men, okay? But the studies have shown that men tend to have more narcissistic behavior than women. And since the evolution of narcissism within a person is heavily determined by outside influences, remember I told you that we're all born with narcissistic tendencies, but where the change tends to happen is from the outside influences, which would be your parents, your church, your community, those types of things. Then it's safe to conclude that society has played a huge part in how men are more narcissistic than women. And I'm going to break that down for y'all based on my thoughts. Okay. So a portion of my dissertation addressed the antiquated views of the Bible on women. And a portion of that research, I discovered that the influence of misinterpreted scripture impacts heavily social behaviors. Those social behaviors are based in traditionalism, gender roles, male superiority. And if you're constantly fed messages that says, because you're a male, you're always right. Because you're a male, you're always in control. Because you're a male, you have the right and tendency to rule over everything all the time. Those are the antiquated, misinterpreted passages or verses of the Bible that are used to enable narcissistic tendencies within males. So, and women don't get those same messages. Women get messages that are more towards a domesticated, submissive state of being. And that's also misinterpreted, but it can explain why studies now show that more men have narcissistic behavior than women. Because as I said, as they grew and evolved, if a little girl and a little boy, both born at the same time, both born with the innate desire to get their needs met based on survival, so they're both crying to get a bottle or get changed or get held or cuddled or nurtured, what have you, at some point the girl is going to start to receive messages that your total existence is to support the male. Like, you don't exist for any other reason but to support the male. That male child is going to continuously hear messages that says, you're fantastic, you're perfect, you rule over everything, she needs to submit to you, you don't have to submit to her. That is going to start to distort the relationship between consequences and behaviors and decisions. Because if you're constantly told that you as a male, just because you're born male, you're superior in all things, which makes you right about all things, then that will definitely lead you to some narcissistic thoughts and narcissistic behaviors. Whereas women are not given those same messages as consistently as males are. And I know that there is a component of feminism, which I talked about that in my dissertation as well, and how feminism impacts women with regards to that. And I'm not saying that there aren't any narcissistic women, and I'm not saying that all narcissistic women are feminist. That's not the connection I'm making. The connection that I'm making is that our social existence and society impacts how we evolve, how we grow, how we mature, how we think, how we function, how we participate in relationships as we grow and mature. So the distinction between how that male child evolved and how that female child evolved definitely plays a part in narcissistic behavior in the future, how they evolve into a narcissist. There is no proof that shows that because you're born male, you are superior in every way. That's just not it. The Bible itself talks about man and female having equal authority. Yeah, just think about that and meditate on that. And think about how you show up in the world and how you engage with other people. And do you have a tendency to just prioritize yourself no matter what the consequences are? I will say that we live in a time where that seems to be a constant message of like, the only person that matters is you. And I have no problem with self-love. I definitely personally take time to love on myself by maintaining my health, taking time to journal, taking time to pamper myself regularly. I do all of the things. I just think that when it comes at the detriment of somebody else, and not the inconvenience, because inconveniencing people and then something happening at their detriment is two different things. But I think that we just need to think through our behaviors and consider how our behavior impacts other people. And that's one of the things that narcissists don't do. So let's talk about some of the characteristics of a narcissistic person. We kind of talked about like the baseline of like they just prioritize themselves over anybody else, and anything else. Like their comfort is the most important thing to them, and they just can't even grasp the concept that their comfort is a discomfort to anybody else or anybody in their lives, anybody around them. But that's the baseline. So let's just talk through some of the characteristics. The number one thing is lacking empathy, which goes into that initial baseline that I just shared with you guys. So lacking empathy is one of them. Delusion of grandeur. When I tell you the narcissistic relationships that I've been in my life, the delusion of grandeur is outrageous to me. I'm just like, how did your mind even come up with that? Like, and I will say that when you're in it, you possibly can't see some of these traits and some of these characteristics, either the narcissist or the person that is subject to the narcissist. Both of them cannot see what's happening. Sometimes outside people, when I was in relationships with narcissists, other people were like, you know, that person is a narcissist, right? And I could not see it. So delusions of grandeur, that I guess a great example of that would be that they think that they are the best of the best of the best in every area, even if they have no skills in that area, no experience in that area. If there is a gold medal for that area, they believe that they deserve it, even though they aren't equipped to deserve it. That's just one basic example. I could go on and on and on, but I just want to keep this video at 20 minutes. I'm going to try to. Next is, which we talked about a little bit, a broken relationship between actions and consequences. Like they just can't wrap their head around the fact that their behavior impacts you. And I've been in a relationship with a narcissist where like they would do something and I would be like, hey, that was mean, or that was unkind, or that was inconvenient to me. And they would be like, what's that got to do with you? Like that was their answer. Like, cause we in a relationship. What do you mean? I just could not understand as a person who is, I tend to be, now that I'm on the healing side of me, I tend to be very level headed and like, do what you gonna do. So when there's extreme behavior, it is mind boggling to me. I just can't even wrap my head around it most times. Nevertheless, there's a broken relationship between action and consequences. Another characteristic is gaslighting, which that is another buzzword that's being thrown around. And most times that I see it being used, it's not being used correctly. I think some people just throw it into normal conversation as a punch, like, I'm not winning the argument, so I'm just gonna say you gaslighting me. That's not what it is. Gaslighting, I have been a victim of gaslighting, and I'm telling you, it sends you in such a state of confusion. You don't know what is up, what is down. And it starts gradually, which once you read the book that I'm going to suggest at the end, it's happening, and sometimes you don't even know that it's happening. And I've heard this, like, a lot of people be like, I'm too smart to be gaslit. You don't know what's happening when it's happening. You don't. You don't. It's trying to have a conversation with someone and they flip the conversation. You don't even know how the conversation got flipped. And they are constantly doing research on you, whether it's through interaction or proximity, what have you. They're constantly doing research in order to use it against you later so they can gaslight you. So if you're being vulnerable and you're being transparent with a narcissist, they log in that information for later to use it against you in a gaslighting scenario. Now, they may not have the thought process to think through that and connect those dots. But if they're seeing a therapist, the therapist will be able to connect those dots for them. And if they're in a relationship with a healthy person that can recognize it, that healthy person can connect those dots for them too, which is also difficult because narcissists do not like accountability. Like, you can't tell them they're wrong. You can't tell them they made a mistake. They don't want to hear it. To them, there's no such thing as constructive criticism. There's only criticism. So if they're putting a cap on a bottle wrong, you're like, hey, can I help you with that? Because I don't think that's the correct way. That narcissist is not going to let you help them. Okay. And being in a relationship with a narcissist before, yeah, accountability is hard. They usually flip the table and turn the tables on you. When you're trying to hold them accountable, they will switch it up and be like, your approach is wrong. You will change up your approach and they will still give you the same reaction. They will ask you to do something and you will do it. And then they will say, I didn't ask you to do that. And in your mind, you're like, I could have swore you asked me to do that. So that's one of the traits of narcissistic behavior, is gaslighting and a lack of accountability. I mean, there's so many others. I suggest reading the book, and I'm going to give you a podcast link at the end of Jay Shetty. I love Jay Shetty. Man, he's so fantastic just about human behavior and human relationships. I am fascinated with human behavior and human relationships, which is why my dissertation was more towards that, even though I was in a theological program, is because human behavior just fascinates me. Why people do the things that they do, what initiates that thought process to make them do what they do, which is why I was intrigued to talk about narcissism and my experience with narcissism, and how that behavior starts and how it impacts others. There's a really nice guy, which I can't think of his name. Well, I don't know if he's nice or not. He seems nice enough. His wife may know how nice he is. I don't know. I've just been watching his videos on YouTube, and he talks about narcissism from the perspective of a narcissist. And it was enlightening to me, considering I have been in so many relationships with narcissists. I had a boss that, like, this boss would just not show up and then not give me any like task for the day or what I was supposed to be working on. And then the next day be unbelievably mad at me because I hadn't completed task. And I would be like, what task would that be? I felt like I was being supervised by a crazy person because I was just like, this is insane. And when I say this boss would not show up, I mean, they would just not show up. I don't mean for a day. I mean for weeks at a time. And then I would email them because they would be like, oh, I'm not coming in. And then be like, just email me if you need anything. I would email them. They would not email me back. So what am I supposed to be doing all day? I don't know. But then the conversation would be so gaslighting that I would just be like, I am in the Twilight Zone. And if you're a Gen X, you know what the Twilight Zone is. But I felt like I was living in the Twilight Zone. And then being in a relationship, a personal relationship with a narcissist was difficult. It was so difficult. And there are aspects of me that I am still healing from with regards to being in a narcissistic relationship. So as I progress and as I move through life, that's one of the reasons why I watch that guy, because I just want to gain clarity on how a narcissist operates and thinks. It's also why I read that book. It's also why I watch Jay Shetty's podcast. So if you have any curiosity about narcissism, read the book, listen to the podcast. Hey, even subscribe to the guys, and maybe I'll put his link in the description of this particular episode, because he's so transparent about it, about his journey of discovering that he's a narcissist. Now, his profession is that his narcissism came through trauma. And I think within one of the narcissistic relationships that I was in, that person definitely became a narcissist through trauma. Just because of some of the things that I found out that that person experienced in their childhood. I was like, wow, yeah, that enlightened me. And I thought to myself, I could probably be in a relationship with that person again if they were willing to get consistent therapy like this particular guy on this podcast is. One of the things he says is that, and one of the things that Dr. Ramani says, which I'll show her book at the end, is that there's no cure for narcissistic behavior. However, with continuous therapy, a narcissist can learn behaviors that combats their narcissistic trauma. I do wonder if the narcissist gains true healing from, if it's a narcissistic person that became a narcissist through trauma. I wonder if that person can gain healing from that traumatic experience, and then it will be easier to transition out of their narcissistic habits and behaviors. Just thought. The show is called Because I Have Thoughts. That's a thought. And maybe I'll do a research paper about it, because I'm so intrigued by narcissistic thinking, how it happens, where the point of growth it happens, like how old you are. I'm assuming, just from observation and learning what I've learned so far, is that it probably happens during the toddler age, where discipline comes into play and how parents respond to discipline. I can see some of those examples in my own life, where as a female child, I wasn't privy to a lot of decisions and access that the male children in my family were privy to. So I could see how that could contribute to narcissistic behavior Yeah, I'm just curious, y'all. I got all kind of thoughts going on in this brain of mine about narcissistic behavior. I hope that this conversation has definitely inspired you, launched you, propelled you into learning more about narcissistic behavior, narcissistic disorders, and even if you yourself have narcissistic tendencies. And let me clarify right now, just because someone has 2 or 3 of these behaviors doesn't mean they're a narcissist. In order to be classified as a narcissist, you got to have all the characteristics, every last one of them, okay? So don't be going in your life like, oh, you a narcissist, you a narcissist, don't do that. You have to have all of them. That is how most therapists, most doctors can classify a narcissist, is that they have all of the characteristics. And sometimes narcissism can be misdiagnosed. You have people who have ADHD, bipolar disorder, even manic depression can have narcissistic tendencies, but not necessarily be classified as a narcissist. So all of that to say, people, as you're going through life, check yourself and check the people around you. No, I'm just kidding. Think about how narcissists could be impacting your life, if you may be in a narcissistic relationship, or if you may be a narcissist yourself. Anything is possible. So I just wanted to share my thoughts on the topic. I may still take a break for the summer. I don't know. It's wherever the Lord leads me. I don't know. But next up, I got book recommendations. Well, I should now say like references and resources, because not all of them is books for this particular episode. But hold tight. I got resources next on the topic of narcissism. All right, it's time to jump into the resources and references that I have for this particular episode of Because I Have Thoughts. This is kind of what sparked the idea for this particular episode, or contributed to it, was reading some of these books and listening to this podcast and the work of this particular doctor. So the first book up is The Way of Integrity by Martha Beck. If you're listening on Spotify, the book name and author is in the description of this particular episode. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see the graphic. I never know which side it's on because the graphic is always added in post. Maybe I should pay attention to which side it's on. I think it's on this side, but anyway, you can see the graphic. Again, the name of the book is The Way of Integrity by Martha Beck. Now, this book isn't particularly on narcissism. It just talks about finding integrity within yourself and within relationships. And there is a portion of the book that I'm not a fan of, but I do feel like she has great points on defining what integrity is and finding integrity for yourself. Now, the reason why I put this book on this particular episode is because narcissists tend to stray away from, I don't want to say they lack integrity, they just can't comprehend it. Because they have a disconnect between behavior and consequences, integrity falls into that category. In order to have integrity, you have to understand the relationship between decisions, behaviors, and consequences. And a person that has integrity usually exhibits behavior and makes decisions with an awareness of the consequences. So that's the reason why I put this book in, because it talks about integrity, and integrity is a huge challenge or hurdle for a person who is a narcissist or has extreme narcissistic tendencies. All right. So that book again is The Way of Integrity by Martha Beck. The next is actually a podcast, which is by Jay Shetty. I love Jay Shetty. Jay Shetty has no idea who I am. He is not paying me to promote his podcast. He just has a great outlook and take on human behavior. And I'm totally obsessed with human behavior. I probably should have, well, I guess it explains why my dissertation was more about human behavior, even though I was in a theological program, because I'm fascinated by human behavior, but I'm also fascinated how biblical principles impacts human behavior, because I think we negate how we got here. And most of it is from distorted interpretations of scripture. So my dissertation was really talking about that. And Jay Shetty is he's just at the forefront of human behavior right now, and social impact, and how society impacts us and impacts our behaviors. This dude is just fantastic. But anyway, check out his podcast. But he has a couple of episodes on narcissistic behavior. One of them is with Dr. Ramani, and I don't want to say her last name because I'm sure I'm going to butcher it. And I hate when people butcher my name, so I'm just not even going to attempt it because I don't know her personally. If I knew her, I would ask her how you pronounce your last name, girl, but I don't know her. But that leads us into, but Jay Shetty, you can check out his podcast on YouTube. You can also follow him on Instagram, and he sometimes posts clippets, just as I do, on his social media. And you can check out his podcast. Again, his name is Jay Shetty. You can see the graphic there. If you're listening on Spotify, it's in the description of this particular episode. And last but definitely not least, the most important book you gonna get from this episode, people, okay? I have to go in my white girl voice. But anyway, is It's Not You, Identifying and Healing from Narcissistic People by Dr. Ramani Durvasula. I think that's how you say her last name. I'm sorry, girl, if I'm butchering your last name. But Dr. Ramani, like, y'all, she is the leading expert on narcissism right now. You can check her out on all of the social platforms as well. But again, the book is It's Not You, Identifying and Healing from Narcissistic People. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see the graphic. If you're listening on Spotify, you will see the name of the book and the author in the description. All right, y'all, that's all I got on narcissism. I probably have more, but I just don't want to keep talking y'all ears off. I thank y'all so much for continuing to listen and checking me out on Spotify and on YouTube. First of all, I want to say a special thank you to the 39% of men who listen to my listen to my podcast on Spotify, and who watch my podcast on YouTube. I don't know why you listening, but I thank you for listening, because I just didn't think that men would be listening. But thank you. I appreciate it. So I just wanted to say a special thanks to my 39% of male listeners and viewers. Thank you. I appreciate it. Anywho, thank you all for listening. And thank you to my subscribers. I don't have many, but I appreciate those who tune in every 2 weeks and listen to my videos, or I'm sorry, listen to me on Spotify or watch the videos on YouTube. I truly, truly appreciate you. Please, 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 if you are listening to my videos, listening to my Spotify or watching my videos, I would love for you to like, follow, and subscribe. It matters, you all. It matters how I stay on the platform, how my videos and my podcasts get rotated through each platform. So please, please, please like, follow, and subscribe. Even if you're not going to watch regularly, you can still subscribe, y'all. Just turn your notifications off. I need the points. Again, thank you for listening. I'm Dr. T, and this is another episode of Because I Have Thoughts. Bye.